Hey, welcome into the Penn Live Wrestling Podcast, our very first episode. Dustin Hockensmith here. I'm joined by Dave Heckard. For the first will be a weekly edition of this show. Dave's going to share some thoughts with us every Monday. And the plan will be to break down the latest in the Mid-Penn and touch into the District 3 scene as well. The Penn Live Wrestling Podcast will also feature some interviews with coaches and wrestlers, some other analysis all season long. So I would definitely encourage you to subscribe to it. You can do that on Spotify, Apple, and iHeartRadio. So we're in a lot of platforms where we need to be. Dave, first of all, welcome in. I'm super excited to have you on board. And I think wrestling fans in this area, we don't really have anything like this. And we certainly don't have anything with somebody like you to kind of share your thoughts. 17 years coaching at Cumberland Valley. You were a state champion yourself. You coached, I think, 4 state champions. I can't think of anybody better to break down what's happening around here.
No, thanks for having me, Dustin. I'll tell you, I really wanted the introduction. Every time I come on, listen, you laugh, but I wanted the introduction to be the chicken dance theme song. I think that would have been outstanding. And, we couldn't do that because of some different loopholes and whatnot. But either way, no, good to have me. And I think this is going to be pretty neat here to get out and kind of just share different perspectives on the season and kind of keep everybody up to date with what's going on in the Mid-Penn. So
here's what I'll say about the chicken dance. All right. So first of all, there's technicalities in terms of what can be used and what can't be. So that's first and foremost, but I respect you for wanting to dive into that because, I don't think if you're putting a list together of say the top 10 moments of your coaching career, that moment probably wouldn't be on that top 10, but I respect the fact that you're willing to confront that.
I mean, it would definitely be like the most memorable. I can say that, yeah, for sure.
Well, we are going to launch into the season ahead. We'll probably talk about the chicken dance, I assume, at some point in time, which I don't know. I think that's pretty. I don't know if we need to really launch into the details of that. I think that's when you say Dave Heckard chicken dance, most people will kind of get it. But we're gonna start on our very first episode here, just looking back at the 2020-2021 season. It was so unique and so difficult and challenging in all these different ways. And I fully grasp that there are much bigger things going on in the world, especially at that time than wrestling. But I do think it's worth discussing just how hard that was on people like you, on your wrestlers. And, first I want to go back to the beginning of it, and let's go back to, all right, the state championships, and you get into this off season, and it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a real have versus have not situation when it comes to, the really, really good clubs that you can wrestle in, and the programs that don't have maybe one of those elite clubs nearby. And I felt like this off season, you had to kind of send kids out on their own more so than usual. And I think that have versus have nots thing was exaggerated a little bit. Just walk me through, not really knowing when preseason begins, exactly what's going to walk through your doors.
No, I think you said it, from the start. Wrestling season is and any high school athletic season has its challenges, from top to bottom. But I think, obviously this season or this past season with COVID just made things a lot more challenging. And it's interesting you bring that up. I was in it was a preseason wrestling steering committee meeting, and you even might have been there. It was at Cumberland Valley, and Dave Gable, who's the head coach of Dallastown, outstanding human being. I mean, just an awesome guy. And him and I had gotten a conversation about preseason, how he coming into the preseason without the guys doing anything all summer, before the COVID year, how far back your guys were, and not necessarily your wrestlers. I mean, every team has guys who wrestle and you have wrestlers, and you need both, right? Your wrestlers per se, his son at the time was going to be a senior, those guys, the Jake Lucases of the world, that they went out and they did things, that they found ways to do that. And you came into the preseason, and the guys that don't necessarily do the wrestling year round per se. Your guys who wrestle were the guys that you really saw, man, the growth was really stunted from the previous year to that preseason. And, like Dave had said, he was the guys didn't get a whole lot better because of that time they took off. And I think that was relative across the board, like you had said, the guys who don't have access to the big clubs. And I mean, maybe so. Maybe that's fair to say. But I think like the have and have nots, like, your guys who it's important to found a way to go out and work hard and to try to keep up as much as possible. And the guys who didn't obviously didn't. So, but I think that, from top to bottom, I think people did the best that they could last year, with what you had. And I think, even starting the year, okay, we're going to be wrestling with masks on. It's like, wait a second. We're going to go out on the mat and really get into like a physical altercation with somebody. You're going to physically assault another person, but we have to wear masks. So it was a challenge. But you know what? At the end of the day, one of my biggest worries was, how is that going to be handled from an official's perspective at the beginning of the year? And then when you get to states, how's it going to be handled? I mean, you start conjuring up all these different scenarios that can happen. And reality, I think that the officials and the PIAA did a pretty darn good job, with trying to do the best that they could. And while adhering to any precaution to try to keep people safe. So, yeah.
I thought, from my personal perspective, I thought wrestling in masks was going to be a much bigger disaster than it actually was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I recognize the potential for inconsistency, and you did see that, but I thought it was going to be a lot worse. And I think, from your experience, I think the resilience of the kids showed up, and I think the strategy of coaches showed up to really wrestle and practice with these on, just accepting that these are our circumstances. If we want to make the most of these circumstances, we got to get used to wrestling in this mask. And then, certainly the scene did change toward the postseason when you started intermingling with other districts, other places where the masks weren't as important to coaches, administrators, et cetera. Right. But it did change. But it was, I really thought it was a testament to the kids themselves for working through that.
Yeah, and it's funny. Last year we started the season, and I got this idea, like we're gonna try to harness this thing, and we took like the broken nose mask, like we bought a bunch of them, and then we put like over the mouth, like the cover, and it ended up being a complete failure. I mean, the masks were coming down in kids' faces, and it was like, okay, we just spent a couple $100, scrap that. Okay, now we're gonna throw these masks on, and really, like you had said earlier, we entered practice, and it was like, listen, here's the deal. We're wearing the masks. I remember having this conversation with my team. I'm standing there in front of my team and, hey, we're going to wear these masks. And as I'm talking, I'm getting annoyed by the masks. And I'm going, I don't want to hear any complaining. We're going to wrestle hard. There's no complaints. Well, by the end of it, like, I'm annoyed with my own mask. So speech one, here I am telling the kids, I don't want to hear any complaining. And here I am complaining about this mask, but really the kids were incredible. And not just my own, I mean, across the board, the coaches said how kids came into practice and listen, you're going to wear them because you're going to have to wear them in a match. So you might as well get used to it here, and they did, they wore them and did the best they could in the room to keep them up and do what they needed to do. So, a testament to the coaches, the officials, but really the kids, man. I thought the kids did an outstanding job with that. So,
and I think, just the mentality being out there, and it's just one more thing, I've talked to you about this before, about just the brutal and difficult nature. And this is your quote to me on several occasions. Everything about wrestling is hard. Yeah. It's just one more thing. And I know all winter athletes were going through it. I know every, other athletes in other sports were going through it, but it's just that one extra thing in the sport of wrestling that just felt like such a big ask that, sometimes I think kids are more resilient than adults are, they handled it. Oh, yeah. You see the types of people out there who are making a lot of fuss about this going to the grocery store. And here you have a kid wrestling 6 minutes, getting beat up. He's bloodied, his eyes bleeding, he's taped above the forehead, and he's still wearing that mask. I mean, if they can do it, why can't we?
Right. No, I'm definitely right there, man. And a testament to them. But guess what? Like this year, it's a new year, and we know we don't have to wear them this year. So the kids wrestle at least have a little relief from that. And, not as much on the coaches to try to police all that. And it's going to be definitely a better season with that. So,
and administrators too, because if you recall, I will move on from the mask, but if you recall, like the PIAA didn't have a universal policy for how to handle if you had a mass dispute. So
Right.
it ultimately ended up falling, I believe, on athletic directors to go out there and intervene if they see something. Who's going out of their way to do that?
Yeah,
But
nobody, and it worked out. And again, at the state tournament, which was really, your biggest concern, like, you have all these different areas who are policing it differently. What's going to happen when they all, assimilate and come together? You know what I mean? And how's that going to be handled? And I thought they did a great job at the state tournament. And yeah, I mean, just kind of let you do your thing. So.
Speaking of the state tournament, the other adjustment, and there were a couple that I really want to touch on, but the other adjustment is when you get into the individual postseason, the 1-day tournament. And, trust me, nobody wanted to be in that situation, but, they had to create a situation where the number of entrants was down, that you could get this thing done in 1 day. And that goes for the sectional, district, regional, and the addition of the super regional in addition to the state tournament. It ended up just being a really tough road for a lot of kids, especially, District 3 and the way the state was set up, that the super region was with the WPIAL kids and a lot of kids who, you look out east, for example, east of us, the District 11, and you had a bunch of kids who were 9-1, at the end of the regular season, and they're going into the postseason with that. Then you look out west and you have kids who were 40-7. You could see the differences in the regions going that way. But what was the adjustment when it is a 1-day tournament?
Well,
when you do have,
I got to be honest. I got to be honest. And as far as the sectional tournament, for AAA anyway, I mean, I liked the 8-man bracket. I mean, every other sport in high school, I don't care if it's swimming, track, every other sport, there is a standard to meet in order to be able to participate in the postseason. And wrestling is the only one that there's not. So I felt like capping it at 8 guys. Yeah, you're going to hear a lot of people say, "Oh, well, what about that's more mat time for other guys? You're taking away from the sport." Well, guess what? When you hit the postseason, that's about the upper level guys. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like, hey, let's trim the fat here. Are the guys going to be upset that they don't get in at numbers 9, 10, 11? I mean, sure, there's guys that are going to be, and you're going to have coaches that say, well, yeah, well, I had an 11 seed one time that broke through and qualified, and yeah, I get all that. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think you got to tend to the upper level guys when it comes to the individual postseason, and having one weigh in. You know what I mean? And guys not having to wrestle, pigtail matches. And, I just think your upper seeds anyway, not having to wrestle pigtail matches. I just thought it went really smooth. And, what are numbers 9 to 11 doing in the individual postseason anyway? I mean, where are we going with that? So I liked it. I know they're going back to allowing more this year, which is fine. But man, after sectionals and then in the districts, it became ultra difficult. And then once it hit the super regional, as you know, out in Altoona, I mean, here we are, we're going through this whole thing, and we're going to add the super regional. Well, we're going to load up. We're going to go out to Altoona, which was like taking you were like going back to 1994, you know what I mean? And you go to this gym, and I mean, the level of competition, man, from that super region. I mean, I went back and did some homework. I mean, seven weight classes had reappearances of the finals from super regionals and the state finals. 7.
That's unbelievable.
Unbelievable. And I mean, there was only one weight class at the state tournament that was not represented by any of the finalists in the West Super Region. That was 160, where the Condomini kid from Northampton and the McGill kid from Springford wrestled. Every other weight class, there was at least one representative from the Super Region. In 7 of them, it was a final rematch. In 4 of those, the finals were reversed. You know what I mean? Where one guy won in the Super Region, and the next week that outcome was reversed. So I mean, the level of competition coming from that Super Region out in Altoona was just through the roof. And even for us, I mean, we took 3 guys, and I mean, in reality, I felt like there was really only, I mean, we knew there was one guy getting through, and as tough as we might have thought those other guys were, in reality, they weren't making it. And it was tough, and you saw a lot of good guys sent home that weekend. And yeah, I mean, it was something.
So Gabe Belga, did he wrestle Herrera Rondon out there?
He did.
Yeah.
He starts out, I was going to get this for you. I mean, he goes out at 152 and goes out and he gets the Marone kid from Williamsport who beat him earlier in the year. So he gets that one. Well, then he goes and he wrestles Herrera the next match. Well, that doesn't go as well as planned. Well, then it ends up, man, he goes down and he wins another one. And then I think he catches the kid from Connellsville who just signed with Pitt. And his name's
Kessler.
Right. Yes, Kessler. Yeah. And who we watched wrestle. And earlier in the tournament, he goes and he wrestles the kid from Central Dauphin that beat Belga in the finals. Buckman. He wrestles Buckman. And I mean, completely dismantles Buckman. And we're sitting there watching it. I'm going, well, maybe we got, maybe the kid will get hurt in our match. I don't know. He goes out and I mean, just completely dismantles us. And, that was what it was. I mean, we had the number 1, number 2, number 3 guy all in our super region coming out of there. And, although great experience for the youngster there, reality set in pretty quick. And yeah.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, there were 2 matches that stood out to me that were, the outcome was more or less inevitable. One was Gabe wrestling Herrera Rondon. But what I thought Gabe, and then I said it to you whenever you guys walked off the mat, Herrera Rondon felt it. Like he felt Belga wrestling him. And I thought Belga showed up as well as he possibly could against a 3-time champ who's at Oklahoma now. He's a sophomore out there. The other one was Ryan Garvik from Central Dauphin wrestling Wyatt Henson. For Waynesburg, Wyatt Henson is a next level guy too. He's an upper tier guy. And all you could really do with your guy, both cases here, young wrestlers, is ask them to go out there and just make them remember you, right? Like
go out and
make
battle,
them,
man.
Make them work.
Go out and battle. No doubt. And go out and give him a test, man. See what he's got. And sometimes you get that out of younger guys a little more, maybe because they're, I don't know, politically incorrect, dumber than the older guys, so they'll go out there and not about this much and go after it where, maybe the older guys, reality is a little better for them. So, but no, I mean, I think that when you have young guys like that wrestling those upper tier guys, man, I mean, what are you going to do? You got to go out and give it a go. And I think you're going to see that Belga and Garvik are both going to have tremendous careers here moving forward. So,
absolutely. And probably a little bit better off from getting that feel and knowing, just some confidence that, what, I mean, Herrera Rondon had to work to beat me, and you can maybe build on that.
Yeah.
We will, by the way, the one that you got through, Jake Lucas, who won a state title, we'll talk more about him and that journey, not just this year, not just you and him, but his journey going back 4 years and what it all took for him to get to the top of that state podium and how much he deserved it. We'll be doing that on episode 2 as part of, looking more at the individual wrestlers from last year. The other dynamic here was moving the District 3 and the PIAA team championships around, wrestling the PIAA team championships after the individual championships. How big of an ask was that as a coach, for all the different complexities, including guys who didn't wrestle through the individual postseason, guys who were knocked out of sectionals, having to try to keep them within arm's reach of their weight class so you can field a competitive dual team after the individual season's over.
Yeah. I mean, there's something to that. And I know it was kind of crazy how you went like team districts before states, and then you went to individuals, and then you came back and wrestled like the team state tournament at the end. But again, man, listen, I feel like a lot of those teams competing at team states are going to have guys competing in the state tournament at the individual level, and man, that's a 3-day tournament. I mean, even longer really, if you consider the prelims on Monday, but you're wrestling, Friday, Saturday, I mean, it's multiple weigh-ins. And so you're asking like these kids to weigh in for the team tournament and weigh in at different weights sometimes, right? Like sometimes they're going to weigh in light at one weight just to get a matchup here or there. So you're going to ask them to weigh in multiple times at different weights the week before they start the individual tournament. And I just feel like, you saw sometimes where some of the teams that went through that, you can only get your team to peak so many times a year, and that one time you definitely want your kids to is the individual tournament. And, sometimes you'd have kids peak at the state team tournament with their teams and then turn around and, miss weight the next week. So sometimes they get hurt in the team tournament. And I just think that there's something to that. I liked the format of keeping the state team tournament till the end. I don't know the answer. I don't know how to keep kids involved throughout that period of time where they're not wrestling, where the individual tournament's going on. Last year, we had a chance to go over and work out with Central Dolphin. I took Jake over because of being in Dapper Dan, and they were still working out. And Jeff did a great job. I mean, kind of let the kids come in and get a little workout in. I think, it might have been every day, but it was shortened practice. It was a little more light, and just to get the weights down and kind of go. And I thought he did a great job with that. And it showed because they had a pretty good tournament. And, I think, though, although that might not be the right answer as far as exactly how it was done last year, there's something to that. And again, I think, the key being getting kids to peak at the individual tournament before the state team,
And I think with that in mind, and I think you've been sort of on this side of the fence before too, is being accepting of your reality and understanding what are you subjecting your kids to if you're going to wrestle a team that clearly has you outmanned. I know wrestling is a sport where, you put it all on the line at all times, but, I think you do have to kind of consider, is this worth it or not? Right. And I know that might be a taboo thing to say in wrestling circles, but when it comes to team versus individuals, you do as a coach have to kind of think about that. What are you asking your kids to do, and what's it going to cost me later?
No, and I've been on both sides. I've had teams before where I know these teams are, we qualify for team states and we have no chance of placing. We had teams where we couldn't have passed, but now we have a team where maybe qualifies for state team, but now like we're asking our kids to go weigh in 2 more times, to do something that you're not going to do as a team. So then when you get into the number of weigh-ins and who's making weight at what weight, I mean, what's, like you said, is it worth it? Like, what's the value in all this? And I've been on teams where, we push for the state team tournament because, let's be honest, I mean, if you have a team that you feel can place, you know what I mean? Well, then you're doing it. You're going to go, you're going to put your team out there and you're going to make a go at it. But I mean, in reality, most coaches know where they're at as a team and if they have a shot. And for the teams that don't, like, what are we doing? I mean, really, like, I feel like in some way, shape, or form, you could get a committee of coaches and you could put together an 8-team bracket. You could pick it. I mean, you don't have to win whatever. You could pick the 8 best teams in AA, 8 best teams in AAA, and you could run a 1-day team tournament. You know what I'm saying? And most likely the number 9 team is going to be really mad that they didn't get in. But at the end of the day, the team that's going to win it is going to be one of the teams chosen. So I don't know. I just think there's easier ways to go about it and ways to kind of, do the state team tournament and keep it at a 1-day tournament. I think that would be a big advantage. So
I think I appreciate your ideas on these things more than the PIAA appreciates them, and more, it seems more realistic in my viewpoint than to see this process change at all. And there is a participation element to it. And by the way, I mean, District 3, you've been on this end of it before too, losing or finishing 3rd in the District 3 team championship. And that task ahead of you, having to go east to wrestle, a 6:30 match on a Monday against Bethlehem Catholic. That you kind of, in some case, how it's going to go, but you go anyway.
But you're doing it. I mean, you're doing it because you have to do it. You're not going to not show up. So you load your team up on a bus. You take a 2.5-hour trip. You're probably down a starter or 2 because you really know that you're not going to make them weigh in because the outcome's not going to matter anyway. And they're guys that are struggling with their weight. Maybe they're a little banged up. Maybe they just need a break. So what are you doing? Like, so, all right, here we go. We're going to load up on a bus. We're going to take a 2-hour trip to go get pounded by a team, and that ends your. But again, you're battling and you're in the district team tournament. What are you going to do? Not win? You're going to try to. I don't know. It is.
Central Doll, last note here before we wrap up and we kind of point our arrow towards the individuals in the next episode. But you mentioned Jeff Swaggart, the job that he did with Central Dolphin, and what he did so well was long before the time came to buy into the team championship, he had his team bought in,
Right.
and I think that is probably a statement over his 37 years in coaching that Swaggart has done as well as anybody in the state, is getting his team to buy into the joint mission of his team. They bought into it. And I think especially early in the team championships, the team that bought in the most and had their individual wrestlers buy in and weigh in close to what they did during the regular season had a tremendous advantage. And I thought that was the difference in them knocking off Bethlehem Catholic in the quarterfinal round to get to, Cumberland Valley and wrestle in the semifinals. They run into that Waynesburg team, which I know, and maybe you can lend a voice to this, is there is a conversation about where that Waynesburg team ranks among the great teams in Pennsylvania history. Not only were they tremendous, with 4 or 5 state champs, which is absurd.
6 place winners. Yeah. 6 place winners they had.
Yeah.
I think even the year, we went through, going through the super region they went through, they had 6 medalists. And more would have medaled if they would have had a normal year, because they'd had more guys that probably would have done it, and yeah, I mean, they were just dynamite. I'd put them up there. I tell you what, man, they didn't have, I feel like they didn't have a hole. I mean, everywhere there was somebody that was going to bring it, and they were tough, man, and well coached and all the above. I mean, I one of the best teams I've ever seen is that Central Dauphin team of 2009, where they had 8 regional champions on their team, and they were really tough that year too as a team, but yeah, Waynesburg, man, they were physical, they were mature, they filled in every weight, they spread out well, they were tough, man, they were tough.
Not only were they just objectively tough from top to bottom, you could not have asked for a worse matchup for Central Dauphin, because every area where every weight they had a stud, Waynesburg had a better stud. Yeah, it was impossible.
And that is wrestling is matchups, especially when you're talking dual meets and, who's better than who. Well, you might have a better team than somebody, but if they match up with you and catch the coin flip, and you're done, it's all about matchups. And Waynesburg, I mean, not just matched up with Central Dauphin, but matched up with everybody pretty well, I feel like. So they were good, man. But they lost some guys, but they'll still have some tough guys coming back, and that'll be interesting to see who jumps at the top this year at the team tournament. So
it's a new year for them. It's a new year for us here with the Penn Live Wrestling Podcast. This is our very first episode. Appreciate you tuning in. We'll be here all season long. Dave will be joining us weekly to break down once the matchups begin. Also to look ahead to some of these divisions in the Mid-Penn and to do our homework and to share what we think is going to happen in each of these divisions. So that'll all be coming up in the coming weeks. Stay tuned with us all season long. You can subscribe and download episodes on Spotify, Apple, and iHeartRadio. For Dave Heckard, I'm Dustin Hockensmith, and we'll see you next time here on the Penn Live Wrestling Podcast. Easy enough, right?
Yeah. Good.
It's always, you're always looking for